Good evening, I'm Jose Cardenas. Tonight, a former state senator and a leading voice in America's immigrant rights struggle talks about his new book that chronicles his life's work in Arizona. All this coming up next on Horizonte.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station.
Thank you for joining us. Former state lawmaker and immigrant rights activist Alfredo Gutierrez just released a memoir that analyzes today's immigrant advocacy organizations. It's a call to remember history and act for the future. He uses his life story to tell the history of Mexicans in the United States, immigration, and border policies. The book is called To Sin Against Hope: How America Has Failed Its Immigrants, A Personal History. And joining me now is Alfredo Gutierrez. Alfredo, welcome back to Horizonte. You've been on the show many times to talk about these issues, and it's certainly tempting to get your opinion on a lot of things that are going on today. But I want to focus on the book and really what it is and what it isn't, at least on my reading. And you've got some, near the end of the book, what you refer to as obituary comments from some of the people who've written about you over the years. And I want to quote one of them. This is Richard de Uriarte in the Arizona Republic. 3 generations of Arizonans know him by his first name, just Alfredo, not Alfredo who. He's a singularly enduring, constantly evolving, and complicated public figure whose political career has spanned parts of 5 decades, crossing swords with Republicans from Sandra Day O'Connor to Russell Pierce. Over the years, he's been a student protester, community organizer, legislative leader, businessman, consultant, bon vivant, and Democratic gubernatorial candidate. That's the Alfredo Gutierrez I think most people were expecting to read about in this book. And there are elements of that here, and that would be a great book. But that's not what this book is about. It's really, to my mind, not so much a personal memoir as much as it is a first-hand account of the struggles of Mexican people in this part of the country. I was there, what I saw, what I thought. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. I saw my life story as I related in this book as the structure, using my life, using my family's life, as almost a chronological line on which to be able to weave the story of Mexicanos in the United States since 1848, to weave in a very personal way what it was like to live under that circumstance of intense discrimination that we passed through in the 50s. How that final sort of break took place, what we now term the Chicano movement. That almost a convulsion in our community. It I think was of much lesser importance to the larger America, but to our communities it was a convulsion that ultimately led to the community we are today. So it was an ability to tell the story. It was also the personal story provided the structure from which to tell the story.
Yeah, when we were talking off camera, you said it's kind of the clothesline.
That's right.
To put a lot of things on here, and this book is so much. I mean, it's a primer on immigration. You talk about the laws that have been enacted over different periods of time, the kind of the pseudo-scientific thinking that was the basis for many of them, theories about Mexicans and how educable they might be. It's a social history. I think what the book is about is best captured by a section I'd like you to read, if you wouldn't mind.
Of course.
At the end of chapter 7, and it's at page 181. And you begin there with really the summary, the paragraph that says, at the end of the 20th century. If you'd read that.
At the end of the 20th century, 164 years since the end of the Mexican War, Latinos, Hispanics, Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Mexicans, whatever we choose to call ourselves, face the most virulent anti-Mexican, anti-immigrant climate since perhaps that war. Certainly in my lifetime, and I am old. For 3 decades, so-called government and foundation-funded civil rights organizations have portrayed the Latino community as a dysfunctional people incapable of bettering itself. National immigration rights organizations funded by liberal foundations continued to peddle a comprehensive immigration reform plan based on Reagan's reviled and discredited one. As apprehensions climb, Wall Street and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, have made investment opportunities out of human tragedy, and deportations have reached record levels and continue to stack high, especially under Democratic administrations. Families destroyed, children deported alone and abandoned in Mexican orphanages, and death at the border is the daily bread of our immigration policy. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our options and challenge those who claim to lead us.
And it strikes me that's really what this book is about, and I want to, over the next 15, 20 minutes or so, unpack that as best we can in the short time we have. I want to go back, though, to the beginning of the book, and you talk about the crossing and the message you give students every time you talk to them about their Mexican heritage. Why don't you share that with us?
Well, my family's crossing, I don't think was atypical, but because it was an atypical, people didn't talk about it. You didn't. You denied you were undocumented. You denied you'd ever been deported. You denied how you crossed. But to talk about that openly was to place yourself in danger. Was to place your family in danger. And so this almost secret shroud fell upon that crossing, and it took challenging my father, challenging my mother to understand what it was. Some of that happened as a child, but much of that happened when I was in college and began to realize what Operation Wetback was. I began to understand what it must have been to have been deported
as your father was
in
1932,
and who was an American citizen. So it's how we retain our history as a people and our personal history. It's exceedingly important that we understand the sacrifices that our parents and grandparents made so that we might have lives in this country. Those were immense sacrifices that should never be forgotten.
And the first few chapters are a very colorful picture of life in Miami, or as the natives of Miami call it, Miami, Arizona. Right. And the both the discrimination that existed and the role of the union there, and which actually in some respects a microcosm of the communist scare and how that was used against them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's exceedingly important to recognize that in the post-war era, it was, and even before them, but certainly in the post-war era, and in the 50s, this period of extreme discrimination throughout the Southwest, it was unions. It was the left unions that allowed Mexicans. You have to recall that most unions, certainly all of the craft unions, wouldn't allow Mexicans to join. The International Mine Mill, which was referred to as a communist union, was one of the few unions who actually went out and recruited Mexican miners. And they became, those unions, those leftist unions, became the civil rights organizations that fought for equality, that fought for integration in our community. When schools were integrated in our community, it was the unions that made that possible, that fought for it and integrated the schools. By the way, to my mother's great chagrin, she was not happy about this, that the schools were integrated. But it was unions. At the same time that unions were doing this, they were referred to, of course, in the period of the 50s, the McCarthy era, as essentially communists. Some of the most important figures leading our community. Bert Corona, who went on to found MAPA, Maclovio Arraza, the original founder of the Southwest Council, later the National Council, one of the founders of MALDEF, one of the founders of Southwest Voter Registration, Roberto Arcon. All of these people were at one time or another declared communists, either by congressional committees or by leading political figures. It was the moral equivalent of calling someone a terrorist today. It was exceedingly destructive to a career, for example, outside of labor, outside of the union. Yet these people fought on and in effect changed the way we were treated.
Which is so
in our
important
opportunity.
in a mining town, which is what you grew up in. A few personal incidents I just want to touch on and then come back to some of this. You end several of the chapters with kind of an event that then triggers a new phase in your life. One of them, the minor brush with the law that led to you joining the Army.
Well, it's still a legend in my hometown. People of my generation still refer to it. But the fact is that the Miami had whorehouses, a number of them. I mentioned 3 of them in the book, but I'm reminded every time I go there there was many more. By the late 50s, because of public pressure, and perhaps because there were competing establishments in Maricopa County, they began to die off. There was the last one was called the Keystone Hotel. It only opened on weekends by the late 50s and early 60s, and we were always curious what was going on in there. And as a teenager, we decided to find out. We broke in. What we found was horribly disappointing. Rooms the sizes of cells, reeked of urine smell, and the only thing of value we found was alcohol. We found a lot of booze, and we took it away. But one of the guys we broke in with, a guy but we used to call El Cabezón, decided big head. Yeah, he and his brother decided that the loot was too paltry. They went back and stole a refrigerator, and they carried it away in a little cart, a little, what we call in Spanish, a diablito. It was a huge refrigerator. They put it in this diablito and started taking it, up the street. Of course, the police found them, and they confessed, and we were picked up. And so I had the choice of going to Fort Grant, which was a pretty notorious juvenile detention center in southeastern Arizona, or joining the Army, the military. And I immediately chose to join the military.
So you're in the service.
Mm-hmm.
The Vietnam War is going on, but you don't see combat, ironically, until you get out of the service and you come home, and that's another one of those personal incidents that influences your life, and this is somebody who almost killed you.
Yeah, very, very close to, very close to. I was working in the mine. I was a mucker. We it was hard work, labor work. These are tough towns. These are tough times, and at the end of shift, especially on weekends, shift ended about 11 o'clock at night. We all jumped in cars and made it straight to the bars. We filled the cars with cases of beer, and we went off to favorite places along the creek where we drank and people would sing, and this would go on till the middle of the night, corridos, etc. And on one occasion, a fellow had joined us, a good friend, who was on our crew of muckers, and his father was there. He and his father had a horrible argument. He sent him away. But he came back, and he came back armed with hunting rifles. He had made himself up with Shinola to
as if he was in combat.
That's right, as if he was in combat. And he came back, and he opened fire. He almost killed his father. His leg had to be amputated. It was a serious shot. There was a fellow singing, a Mexican immigrant who knew every corrido, and he was the star of the show, and he shot him in the head, and he fell immediately. He started to shoot us all. I jumped into the creek, and my military training came to great benefit, and I immediately started crawling up the creek so that I didn't present any kind of profile, but he knew all of those tactics. He had been a combat veteran, started chasing me and shooting at me, and it was miraculous that I survived. Many of those bullets whizzed right by my ears.
And you end that chapter by saying, and you decided that maybe it was time to go down the hill and go to school, and you end up at ASU. You become a student activist, a founder of MECHA, the student organization, and you talk about your experiences there and the Robert Kennedy campaign and how that impacted you. Also, your first meeting with Cesar Chavez, and you were a little disappointed in him personally because he wasn't the huge, impressive figure you thought. But later on, you do have some criticisms of him, and I want to get to those. But to make sure we cover all that, eventually you get into politics.
That's right.
You run against Clovis Campbell.
That's right.
An entrenched candidate or senator, and you win. And then kind of Robert Redford type moment in the candidate. Well, now what do we do? Because you hadn't expected to win.
I not only had I not expected to win, I had accepted a fellowship for a PhD in back east, and I was expected to be there in late September. The election, it was a primary. The primary was, I believe, September 2nd here. I can't recall the precise date. But the whole idea is, I was going to lose, and thereafter I was going to head off the sunset.
And the strategy was you would help draw out the vote for Joeddie Lopez, who was running for...
Well, that was certainly what I was accused of by the opposition. But the other part of the strategy was to try and embarrass this candidate. He represented the poorest, toughest area of Phoenix. There was no Medicaid at this time. There was no access. There was no health care to speak of. The county hospital was military barracks, Army surplus barracks. It was an Army surplus hospital that sat in southwest Phoenix. There was no transportation, public transportation to speak of for people to get there. I mean, it was a dismal situation in Central and South Phoenix. There were no bridges between South Phoenix and the rest of the city, and each time it rained, South Phoenix was absolutely abandoned.
So you wanted to shine a spotlight on that, but
Absolutely.
you didn't think you win. You wound up winning.
That's
you end
right.
up going to the Senate, and fairly soon you become the majority leader.
Within less than 2 years.
And you work with some of the most historic figures in the history of Arizona. I just want to run through them and get your comments on them, because you touch on many of these. You refer to the extraordinary Burton Barr.
Burton Barr is singularly, I think, one of the most impressive human beings and leaders that this country's ever produced. He was a war hero and showed extraordinary leadership in World War II. He was a very successful business person, but as a political figure, he was unique. He was unrelenting energy, a sense of humor that never stopped. It was not possible for him to say. But at the same time, he was making a joke. He was considering, of course, some of the most serious public policy in this.
He was the leader of the House Republicans.
That's right. He was able to. At the time, we used to say that the House was 59 members of the House surrounded by Burton Barr. He was the most extraordinary figure. I've met presidents of this country. I've met a number of U.S. senators, etc. Historic figures, but I can tell you without hesitation that the leadership skills, the intelligence, the raw intelligence of that man is unmatched.
You don't have quite as high opinion, almost the opposite, of Governor Raul Castro,
That's right.
who you refer to as a Mexican-American of his generation. What did you mean by that?
Well, one of the reasons the story is there about Raul was to show this tremendous difference between these new generations, what was then referred to as the Chicano generations, these new Mexicanos who just felt, didn't feel restrained by the Americanizers, by being white, by that set of rules and this new set of rules. That's what that sentence refers to. That he was clearly a man of that generation, of that earlier 1950s
and not
generation.
a very effective governor.
Well, he made a number, I think, of mistakes, and some of them were irreparable. His first was he became governor, and even before he was sworn in, he decided that there should be a governor's mansion in Arizona. There isn't one. There's never been one. And he insisted on it. He came upon a scheme to do it. Very wealthy Arizona was going to donate the house to the state. We would provide the individual with a tax benefit for that. And then we would rebuild the house so that it would be safer and become the appropriate place for a state mansion. There was tremendous resistance to doing that, but that was his, even before he became governor, his demand. It led, that act, and we did it, by the way. I was the majority leader. I was as responsible as anyone, and in persuading Burton Barr that we were going to do it. We did it. We passed a piece of legislation that did that. But it left an indelible feeling that somehow he wasn't serious, that somehow, this wasn't about public policy. It was about this house. We spent probably the first 3 months debating the house.
And then he goes out to be ambassador. He's replaced by somebody for whom you have very high degree of respect. But there's a one incident, the Phelps Dodge strike, and we're talking about Bruce Babbitt.
Well, I have great respect for Governor Babbitt, and I thought he was. His tenure was, even as we look back on it, was one of the most productive eras of this state. He had tremendous vision and was able to accomplish it. But he decided at one point he was going to be president, and there was a cost to it. The strike, the union was in strike in Ajo and in Morenci and in Clifton against Phelps Dodge. Very early on in the strike, a little girl, she was 11. Chandra Talent was her name. Was killed. She was at home. She was in her bedroom, and a shot came through, and she died. But she was in the hospital. She was taken to the hospital, taken to Good Sam here.
And the union was blamed.
Immediately, the union was blamed.
And you ended up, and I apologize for going through this so quickly because we're almost out of time. There's some other stuff I want to get to. But you did have some regrets that you defended Bruce Babbitt and his decision to call out the National Guard.
I never defended it, but I never criticized it. And I never criticized what I knew to be happening. The governor had what we then called Arizona CIA, this task force, that had infiltrated both sides, infiltrated the company side and infiltrated the union side. And on the union side was trying, and this is on record, this is not speculation on my part, was trying to run a sting on the miners, offering them arms, etc. On the mining side, they confirmed that the company was importing shotguns, weapons into the mine and preparing.
There's a lot in the book about that, and a very difficult time in Arizona history. And I apologize, we've got less than 2 minutes, Alfredo, and I do want to talk about what is there a theme throughout the book and a criticism you have of organizations in the civil rights organizations, the Mexican American community. You say, for example, it was my view that the Mexican American community was making extraordinary progress in this country. It was the repeated refrain of the poverty industry that we were losing ground in. And there you have some very harsh things to say about National Council of La Raza, about Chicanos por la Causa, which you have found. Give us a very concise statement about what your concern is there. I mean, you give them some credit for the good that they've done, but you do have some very harsh
criticism. The criticism is this. National Council of La Raza was originally Southwest Council of La Raza, and its underlying philosophy. There's major divisions in our community, but the underlying philosophy was that of empowerment, was that of organizing communities so that they might respond politically, electorally, might respond to issues that they faced. It were organizing efforts. They were set up by folks like Mac Barraza, old organizers, to empower the community, to demand what it deserved. The Nixon administration made sure that that was shut down and forced a change. And what happened is those agencies, those organizations were forced to become, they weren't forced to, but they chose to become welfare agencies. And as a consequence of calling themselves civil rights agencies, while demanding more and more federal funds for one welfare ailment or another, we became defined as a people that could not better ourselves. That's right, victim people.
And on that note,
and it was the so-called civil rights agencies that defined us as
We're going to have to end the interview. Alfredo, obviously, there's so much more to talk about. This is a great book. People need to go out and read it. And we'll get you back on to talk about a lot of other stuff that's in here. Thank you so much for joining us. And that is our show for tonight. From all of us here at Horizonte, I'm Jose Cardenas. Have a good evening.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.